mutambo wematongero wenyika, mutambo wetsiva yemazano, yema-ideas, yema-thoughts. Let's have a clash of civilization and values.
Hai vanhu veZimbabwe, tinoda rutsigiro rwenyu.
Ndimi makaramba kuderera mashoko, zinodiwana musiki, chonaika zvaidanika.
The political situation in Zimbabwe is a bit fluid at the moment. There has been a lot of movement around political contestations where there is internal conflict in political parties and external, that is among political parties. We have seen the police being dragged into this as they are accused of blocking rallies and meetings for the main opposition, the CCC led by Nelson Chamisa, while he's giving free rein to ZANU-PF and other fringe political parties like the MDCT led by Douglas Munzora. Now we're going to be discussing the political situation in this country as we head for the 2023 general elections. Now join me on this, the Free Talk, where we discuss the issues that matter to the people of Zimbabwe. I'm your host as usual, Dara Blessed Mhla. Joining me this week on this, the Free Talk, in proud partnership with the Frederick Newman Foundation, is Professor Ibbo Mandaza. Now, Professor Ibbo Mandaza is a publisher, renowned publisher, is also a political analyst and has been a political player himself for a very long time. Now, thank you very much, Professor Ibbo, for joining me.
Thank you.
Now, Professor, let us just talk about the fluid political situation in this country. What does it mean to you looking from the outside?
I don't know what you mean by fluid, but basically, as I've written elsewhere, Zimbabwe is a very odd political landscape. Ever since independence, the opposition has been viewed as an enemy. An enemy to be vanquished. Whether it was Joshua Nkomo and Zapu, Edgar Tekere and Zoom, Morgan Sankara and MDC, and now CCC. And you in the media seem not to highlight that. Unlike other countries in the region where there's a tolerance for opposition movements, we saw the president of Tanzania recently attending a meeting of the opposition and making very clear that opposition are necessary partners in national politics. Here it's quite different. I mean, people are knocked around, jailed. We had Ukurahundi, we had Sangrai and then beaten up in 2007. We have people killed into August the 1st. We have, as you said earlier on in your introduction, where the opposition is being harassed across the country, denied access to the media, denied state media, that is, denied rallies. And I'm told there are areas where they can't even hold meetings, let alone just to visit. So we have this very odd situation, which, in my view, cannot should not go unnoticed and should be highlighted. And explains everything else that you may want to ask about the opposition politics.
But what do you think is that the center of this way that the opposition is viewed? What influences that?
Well, it goes back to nationalist politics themselves in the 60s. The demand for uniformity, the demand, almost the very basis of nationalist politics in Zimbabwe, which was enhanced during the struggle, the militarism thereof, of demanding conformity. We don't conform, we're an enemy. And that led to the idea of one-party state. I'm now clear that it's less to do with the regime of one-party states that we had under the Eastern Bloc, for example, or even under Kaunda and Nyerere. I think it has to do more with the combination of that demand for conformity that is in nationalist politics and militarism that came with the struggle and has been sustained to this day, where we have the fact of a coup, which for many of you has become an accepted reality, even by the opposition themselves. They seem to have accepted the idea of the coup, so they're living the coup. And so one would have expected the opposition movement, first and foremost, to have questioned the coup, not support it. The way that I've seen the video of Morgan Changai blessing the coup. I've seen the video of Chamisa defending the coup. When they could have seen it more, as most of us saw it, as a coup to install a faction within the same regime. That was quite obvious. And now I think that creates a problem for the opposition, the lack of clarity, and more important, the lack of a definition of an alternative. I've never heard Chamisa or any of the opposition elements raise the question of constitutionality or constitutionalism, or the need of what we call the definition of democracy and accountable executive, a vibrant legislature, and a fiercely independent judiciary. Those are the principles that should define democracy. We don't hear them say that. And people are right to think and conclude that opposition politics have become part of our turn-to-eat politics. Get in at any cost, as long as you are there. There's no definition of policy at all, statement thereof. So here we are.
In your response, you talk about militarization or militarism in Zimbabwe. To what extent is this entrenched, and to what effect does it have for the 2023 general elections that we are going to go through?
We have to go back to 2000. On the back of the fast-track land reform, or let's go back to the referendum of 2000. And I was a commissioner myself in the Constitutional Commission of 1999 to 2000. When the referendum was rejected unanimously, not for the right reasons, in my view. The referendum outcome had less to do with the nature of the constitutional document itself than with the fact that, one, the opposition MDC, which just had been formed, could not be seen to be supporting a constitutional document at the same time as it sought to take over power from the ZANU-PF. And secondly, there was lack of trust in Mugabe. For some of us, we saw the Constitutional Commission document as the pretext or the basis upon which Mugabe might have exited power. it's open to debate. Certainly, I believed at that stage, and talking to Mugabe as I did at that stage, and Mugabe, genuinely wanted to use the constitutional document as a means to transit, and that he would not have stood in 2002. At least he told me that. Okay, in a discussion, the last discussion I had with him 2.5 hours, when we agreed that really he had long reached the apex of his power, and that from 1995 onwards he had lost. He in particular, but also ZANU-PF had lost the masses in politics. Well, the referendum changed all that. I saw Mugabe the day after the referendum result. I had gone to ZANU-PF with a friend of mine, Amos Sawyer from Liberia. He was here as part of the observer mission of the AU on the referendum. So I accompanied him to ZANU-PF headquarters. Mugabe sat very serenely in his chair. And as we were leaving, he said to me in Shona, did you see how the whites came out yesterday in the hundreds to vote against the constitution document? I said, yes, I saw that. But I said also I understand why, why a good document like that has been rejected, the political context and so on and so forth. Before I could finish explaining, he said to me, Ashanduona, they will see me in my true colors. And so began the first tackling reform. The second point, of course, is that rejection of the referendum, of the constitution of the referendum, was a warning sign to ZANU-PF that indeed, as I had explained to Mugabe, ZANU-PF had lost the masses. So they began organizing on the back of the fast track land reform, a kind of pushback against this new and emergent opposition, which was MDC. And so from 2000 already, at first through the war veterans, but soon after, or if not at the same time or coincidentally, the military got into politics. I remind you, 2002, a statement by Zinavashe that they would not salute anyone who had not been in the struggle, that they would not salute Morgan Tsvangirai. Remember that?
Yes.
Yeah. In my view, that is the beginning of direct involvement of the military. I say direct, and in the context of saying that they had always been indirectly involved, or that we were indirectly involved as on the struggle days in politics. So one can argue, in the absence of empirical evidence, that ZANU-PF has been able to keep in power, stay in power, on the back of military support. But it's very clear.
But how do you say that? We've seen a lot of people voting for ZANU-PF. I mean, they've got into office via elections.
Yes, but I think in many respects, in the political economy of elections, anywhere in the world, there is seldom a situation where the incumbent is re-elected. Certainly, one can argue that over time, the members of parliament would win wherever they stand. Depends very much on the popularity in the community and so on to win. But certainly for presidential, there's no doubt that Mugabe lost every presidential thing since 2002. And likewise, Mnangagwa lost 2018. There's no doubt about that. So that one has to look at elections and separate. I don't know if you're aware of why harmonized election process was introduced. It was precisely to try and protect the presidential poll. Okay? In the expectation that if I'm voting for Blessing Mushlanga as MP, I'll also vote for Mugabe as president. That's the origins of harmonized elections. It doesn't work out that. For example, 2018 elections, Mnangagwa lost in 118 constituencies. Are you aware of that?
Yeah, sure.
180 out of 210. In some you barely scraped through. And in some you glaringly lost. For example, Much North, where ZANU-PF won 9 seats, you got 5% of the vote. Manicaland, where ZANU-PF did very well, Mnangagwa lost Manicaland. Give an example. You can look at the stats yourself. You know? So there's been the issue of rigging and the role of the military in the electoral process is legion now. Let's agree on that. The composition of ZEC itself, ZEC is largely the security apparatus. The current behavior of ZEC, where they would not publish the voters' roll, the chaos around the implementation report, all show an electoral system that is largely flawed, extremely flawed. And I repeat, there's no way that ZANU-PF would have been still in power without the military. And I have to remind you, in 2008, Mugabe had considered defeat, presidential. And he was about to go when Mnangagwa and Chiwenga arrived the day after and said, "Look, you stay where you are." And it took 5 weeks to get the election results. You remember that? There's no doubt in my mind that the so-called runoff was contrived, knowing what I know. Secondly, if you remember, the document which the military presented to Morgan Tsvangirai in 2008, when they were expecting Morgan to win, which he did, they gave him seven demands, to do with their security. These were implied, if not stated clearly, in the coup document of 2017. The main of which was different from 2008 was that the military said they feared that ZANU-PF would lose in 2018, hence the coup. They were intervening in politics, blatantly so. They said they're doing so to save ZANU-PF. Remember that? Yeah. So there's no argument about the role of the military, surely. There shouldn't be. Equally, there should be no argument as to why, as long as the military is in power, that one would expect the opposition to win. It's fallacious.
Nelson Chamisa appears to have confidence that he will take this 2023 general election. He will be president after.
He said the same thing in 2018. Morgan Tsvangirai said the same thing to me in 2016. Maybe true. The question I'm asking you, if people have taken power on the basis that they don't want ZANU-PF to lose, why would they allow him now? They might, but what would be the deal?
Are you saying there has to be a deal with an opposition so that the military, as you speak, will allow ZANU-PF?
I think that's what inspires, what's his name? Chamisa's sense of confidence about elections. I find it amazing myself, at the same time that a person is being harassed, or virtually almost decimated, headquarters taken away, MPs taken away, denied the right to have rallies, and so on and so forth. I just wonder where his confidence comes from. If you have to ask him, where is the confidence come from? What's the catch? What is the deal? Huh? You can't ask me that. You have to ask him. If he's so confident, then there's a deal. Because he can't be expecting that the elections will be free, fair, and non-disputed. What would give him that kind of confidence? We have been running a series ourselves as SAPES and RAW for the last 8 months, and clearly the conclusion is that the elections cannot be and will not be free and fair, that the outcome, if they are held, be disputed election again, as before. Question of history repeating itself. So one has to ask, where is Chamisa getting the confidence from? What is it? If elections are held, there is also a view that elections may be postponed. I believe that that scenario is more likely now. There are many reasons why Emerson Mnangagwa would want to postpone the election.
The ZANU-PF has already rolled the ball pushing for primary elections. Why would they want to postpone?
Why were they postponed? Why were they postponed primary elections? And if they were to be held, say tomorrow or this weekend, why are they being held 5 months ahead of schedule? Never been done before. What would be the status or plight of the sitting MPs? Blessing Mhlanga is MP. The young lady there wins the primaries in your constituency now, and for the next 5 months you know that you are done. What will be your position? The likely thing is that as president I would come and say, okay, don't worry, these newcomers who have won the primaries are outsiders. Do you want to stay on another 2 years? What would you say to that? Whether you are ZANU-PF or CCC or MDC?
Some believe that these guys those in parliament have been given a retirement package, $40,000 loan, so they'd likely accept it, wouldn't they?
Is that a retirement package? I'm going to say that. And is 40,000 enough for you? Blessing as an MP. You'd expect another 40,000. Anyway, the point I'm making is that there is a possibility that the sitting MPs on both sides of the aisle will be offered a package they cannot refuse for postponement of elections. And there's evidence that, well, I shouldn't say evidence, but there is enough talk about Chamisa being approached by Emerson through intermediaries to accept the idea of postponing the elections and in favor of GNU. It's now open talk.
Would that be beneficial for the people of Zimbabwe if that were to happen?
Regrettably, the politics is not about the people these days. I saw a very sad video today where someone was being asked, how do you feel about all what's going on? And the person actually broke down in tears and said, look, politics is not about us. The MPs, it's our time to eat. The MPs, the ministers getting all these packages, the deputies getting a package, and chiefs getting vehicles, and so on and so forth. Where are the people, except as fodder for voting?
But do you think
that's the nature of our politics? Sadly, not only here, but everywhere else. What we call the elite pact. If the GNU was an elite pact, one can say that we are likely to see an elite pact again. You saw the video on Sharumbira yesterday. It's gone viral. What is he saying? Let's get an elite pact.
But do you think Emmerson Mnangagwa, the president of Zimbabwe, does not have confidence that he would win this 2023 general elections, given the support that appears to be around him?
I told you the distinction between support for MPs in their constituencies and support for the president.
But he's got ED, teachers for ED, churches for ED, the apostolic faith, which has got large numbers, but supporting him day in, day out. The chiefs, doesn't he have a whole army of support around him?
So what? I mean, and where would you have all that army of support so extrovertly as they are? Why? Why are they being formed? Next to be journalists for ED. Probably, when are you starting that one? The facts on the ground and looking at the data, like it is our job to do. There is no way that Emmerson can win in a free and fair election, and there is no way that many of the MPs in Zambia will win in a free and fair election. Clearly to me, because basically the mood of the people is always the case in elections anywhere in the world. Is usually against the incumbency, whether because I want to take over your position as MP or really want to see what the other side can do, And even in Zambia where HH won resoundingly, I doubt if you win as resoundingly if he wins at all in the next election, because the challenges that an African state government faces is so almost insurmountable. The problems of eradication of poverty, better life for all, and so on and so forth. There's so many. So when people vote, as they do normally, is to expect a better life, And we have to ask the mass of the people. I'm not a member of that, you and I. But you go around and talk to them. Most of them are against the incumbent government, clearly.
Let's talk about this phenomena that we have seen, a new phenomena in ZANU-PF where you've got ED for this, ED for that, teachers for ED and stuff like that. It's a new thing in ZANU-PF, is it?
Very new. And why? And why? It has to do with a presidential candidate whose position is very tenuous. That's the reason. There's no other explanation for it. It betrays a serious lack of confidence around the presidency. Chronic lack of confidence, in my view. But for us who are political economists and who are familiar with the Zimbabwean political scene, it's not surprising at all. And I would say that is why Emmerson is said to want a postponement of the election. And conversely, that is why Chamisa is so confident about winning. I would say vainly confident.
Are there any internal, dynamics within ZANU-PF itself that might affect its performance in this election that is coming?
Yes, Bora Msango phenomenon, 2008, repeat of that, clearly. And the facts on the ground, as I've given to you early on, the fact that Emmerson lost in 118 constituencies, in which his ZANU-PF won, tells you something. We've had Bora Msango before. It can happen again. Or rather, why shouldn't it happen again?
There's this clause in the Constitution, Ibbo, that limits the term of office of a president. Now, if President Emmerson Mnangagwa is re-elected, he will not be able to run in the next election. Does that affect his performance? Will it affect his performance given the contradictions in ZANU-PF?
I think it's an unrelated issue at all. I mean, it's all about himself, isn't it? One has to ask why at his age, he wants a second term. And why does he want a postponement of 2 years if the reports are true? It's all about him, I would say. It's less about the party.
Some have argued that if he does come back, allegiances are going to be immediately are going to switch to the person who appears would be able to take over from him within the party and might not be able to have control of the party over the next 5 years if he does win.
You're inferring to the Chiwenga factor. I've never been able to link people who share those views, who view Chiwenga as a competitor to Emerson, people who think Chiwenga should be president, with the views of Chiwenga himself. He's mostly in denial of these reports about competition or conflict between the two of them. It's difficult. And for me, I see no difference really between between Emerson being in power and Chiwenga being in power. They are the same lot, in my view. But in the same way that people naively expected something better out of the coup, that would be better than Mugabe, which has not happened, because it won't happen. Because these are birds of a feather. Is it birds of a feather or feathers of a bird? Same. For me, they're the same guys, the same people. Emerson and Chiwenga had been the rock foundation of Mugabe. So why did you all guys dance on the 18th of November and expect something different? I can't understand. I can understand if something was happening on the moon, but here, how do you expect anything different? Well, some of us have been born right. This was the same thing. A faction of the same regime taking over. And I would say that nothing will change as long as these guys are there. Nothing.
So, in your view, Vice President, the retired Army General, does not seek to take over power and be president?
I don't know. No, do I care? It's not material to me at all.
As a political scientist, looking at the political economy, does it look certain that retired General Chiwenga would be the next president of Zimbabwe?
No, it cannot be. It cannot be certain. A day in politics is a lot. Still far away. We're 5 months away from elections. How can it be certain? You can't. Anything can happen. But what about another coup?
Is that possible?
Of course, why not? If one coup takes place, can it happen again? Why not? You know the story in politics, we always say, one coup begets another coup. Of course it's possible. Highly possible. There are enough reasons, many reasons for why another coup could take place. It's too many. There was argument when the coup took place in 2017, argument among some of the generals that if they didn't do the coup the way it was done, then maybe the coup would have been done by others, junior officers, with different implications, but the coup is a coup, in my view. A coup is essentially a breach of the constitution. And right now we have a situation where the constitution has been breached and everyone pretends that constitutionalism is normal. No, it's not. It's not at all, in my view.
Let's turn to Nelson Chamisa. There's been this exciting debate around not having structures. On the political front, does that matter?
Well, of course it matters. The question should be, why is he averse to structures? That's the question you'd be asking. When there were structures before. Why is he dismantling the structures? Why is he averse to structures? That's the question you'd ask him. Others say it's because he sees the old structures of the MDC as a burden on his program. So he wants to push them aside and create a new framework. But it's taking a long time, partly because it's going to be very difficult for him to argue that he's not part of the old MDC. You know, it's there. How do you dispense with it? The renaming MDC to CCC doesn't change the history of the movement. Know the structures, know the understanding of the population out there. And as it turned out now, the breakaway or the what MDC Monzora are in disarray. They are finished. And one would argue that maybe you should have just retained the name MDC instead of fomenting a new one.
But you say they're in disarray. Monzora believes that he's the hottest in town, and that
no, it's not true. He's not. You know, I've not heard him say that. If he's saying that, is a serious case of denialism. He's not. He's a finished factor. Gone. Finished. Even ZANU-PF, who caused him to be such, you know that he have little or no value to them. Nothing. And if there is a GNU, he's unlikely to feature at all. Okay? You know, I'm sorry to say, but details are wrong, but he's gone.
He's approached the courts to postpone the election and also disputing the delimitation report. What effect is that a constitutional challenge on the elections as we face them?
Well, it's a fact. It points to two things. One, it points to the possibility of ZEC being sacrificed in the pursuit of postponement of elections. Because the delimitation report is definitely flawed. Okay, no doubt about that. They've broken all the constitutional provisions around it already. So, and the question therefore is why that Monzora legally, constitutionally is on the right path, but his political motives might be otherwise. But we can ask the same question, why is Tendai Biti's position on the delimitation report different from that which Nelson Chamisa has taken? Chamisa is saying that whatever errors there are in the delimitation report, whatever inaccuracies, we can do them, you know. And Biti is saying no, like Monzora, but for different reasons. I would say that Biti's position is based on the facts before us. How many of us can say that the delimitation report makes any sense? I mean, that those who are expecting that are doing so expediently.
You say that there could be a sacrifice on ZEC, but so far the attempt to sacrifice ZEC has failed, has it not? Because there was a sort of a vote of no confidence by the commissioners around the ZEC chairperson, but the president has ignored it.
But what if the court? Remember, there are two cases. There's Monzora case. There's Madukanu. I don't know. Those two they could merge. If they did merge, I doubt if the intention is to postpone elections or to sacrifice ZEC. All Emerson says is, look, my hands are tied by the law. What I'm saying, if the Constitutional Court declares that what ZEC has done is wrong on there, that's it. What are the implications of that? ZEC is in trouble and the elections must be postponed.
But is it not legally factual that if the court sets aside the delimitation report. What it basically means is that we're going to go to elections using the 2018 boundaries. And then you don't necessarily need to...
2018 boundaries are 2008 boundaries. That's how many years ago? Does it make sense? It could be done. This government is known, this state is known to do anything that it wants. They have a serious disdain for constitutional provisions. They could do that. But I'm saying, others are saying that the only reason why Monzora is going to court as he has done is part of the strategy by Mnangagwa to have the elections postponed. Certainly, elements of Triple C and indeed Chamisa himself argue that Monzora's action is a front for Mnangagwa himself. It's difficult not to believe that. You understand me?
Let's talk about the differences within ZEC. I mean, unprecedented, right? That commissioners would petition against their own chairperson and say we were not involved in this.
Yeah, but there's precedent. With the same in Kenya, remember? Where the chair of the electoral commission said he or she was taking the decision as constitutionally that he or she didn't have to have the consensus of the whole commission. And you know what happened in the Constitutional Court? It was shot down. Remember that? So one would say Chigumba is skating on a very thin ice, legally and constitutionally.
She's a whole judge of the High Court. She would know the law.
She knows the law. So why is she behaving that way? How can you argue anywhere, in any board, any commission, that the chair of a commission or board can make a decision in full disregard of the views of other board members? Where have you heard that? At the least, a chair of a commission or chair of a board would seek consensus. And if I've been chair of many boards myself, I've never known a situation where I could go ahead with anything without the support of my board members. Unheard of. Now, in this case, was 7, is it?
Yes, 7 out of...
Who revolted. That's a crisis. Surely, whatever the reasons were. You know, it the least that should have happened there was for ZEC to be disbanded after that, in my view.
And Chigumba, Justice Chigumba, followed by stripping powers of other commissioners. ZEC had appointed spokesperson Jasper Mangwana to be spokesperson of ZEC. Now she has stripped those powers and says she's the only one who speaks for ZEC.
I'm so sorry, man. ZEC is just a joke, in my view. It's not an independent commission. It's not. It is the Achilles heel of the electoral process in Zimbabwe. You know? On the basis of ZEC's current status and behavior and conduct, it should have been disbanded long ago and the new one reconstituted.
Given this myriad of problems, Ibbo, what does Zimbabwe have to do to get back on the path of constitutionalism, as you say, and democracy?
Since 2016, some of us Surplus Trust and the Platform Concerned Citizens, the latter in particular, have been proposing the idea of a transitional arrangement which would give Zimbabwe a breathing space to reform politically and economically. You heard at the scene I was here, the ADB, and his speech was very clear. That a lot has been done, has to be done economically and politically to reform this country. 2, we need restoration of the constitution, restoration of public institutions. There's hardly any one of them working, including ZEC. National institutions have collapsed in most cases. Restoration of the economy, we're in shambles, except for a few. So we've been proposing that, and not a genuine. We're talking about a transitional arrangement in which brings people together to agree on a framework through which Zimbabwe finds itself and is able to re-engage internationally, is able to have sanctions removed entirely, readmitted to the Commonwealth, and be a full member of the international community. That won't happen under this kind of situation. It won't. And elections, if they take place, what will they change? Really? What is it that they couldn't do before the elections? Why have to wait for the elections? Not to mention the fact that the elections have been now put as a precondition. Everyone is saying that unless the elections are free, fair, and non-disputed, nothing will happen, and neither on the arrears, debt arrears, nor any other, no admission to the Commonwealth, nor any re-engagement. But yet you and I know the elections will not be free and fair. And this is one reason I think Nangaga will be arguing for postponement, because another messy election will mean the international community, the regional digging in. It will mean the continuation of the sanctions regime. It will mean the kind of economic malaise that we have around us. So I think one might say that there's a lot of reason for postponement of elections, provided the kind of things I'm talking about are done in that interregnum.
But don't you appear to be contradicting yourself, because you ask for a postponement of elections and entry of a transitional government, which would be the same thing as those who are seeking for a postponement for elections as well, to have things sorted out before we go to elections.
I said no. There is a coincidence, yes, in terms of time framing, but there's no coincidence in terms of what should happen in the 2 years. We are saying that in those 2 years, or whatever period it is, A, B, C, D should be done explicitly. Political reform, including electoral reform, which includes reconstitution of the ZEC on the election side. It means economic reforms, which includes the consideration of the kind of looting that's been going on, and what to do with that loot. They need to repatriate some of that loot by agreement, amnesty arrangements, and so on and so forth. The kind of Lancaster moment, you read our stuff, kind of Lancaster House type of situation, where we go back to the drawing board.
And do you think there's any third force that can come through, like, for instance, Chapman?
No. The Chapmans are flash in the pan, as they call it.
Sorry, guys.
There can be a third force outside the transitional government that you're talking about, a third force that can change things, like, for instance, the entry of Robert Chapman.
No. We have seen that before. You can also mention us. There's little or no room for third forces in Zimbabwean politics. Some of us tried it in 2008 through Mavambo, which was more formidable in terms of the challenge, in that as Mavambo had a very strong constituency across the state sectors, including the military and security. 2008. In this case, we have just individuals. Before Chapman, you had Noah Manyika. Remember? Who remembers him now? And all these people come in the last minute a few months before an election, you have to assess their chances objectively. He has little or no chance. So there's no third force. The irony in Zimbabwean politics is that so far it appears that political dynamics or political change in Zimbabwe would appear to depend on what happens within the ZANU-PF state than on the back of opposition movements. So people are, I think with justification, are looking at the conflict within ZANU-PF as offering much more potential for change. In the same way that the coup reflected a kind of a change within, even not for better, but still it was some change. Mugabe was thrown out through a coup. The arguments around postponing elections, GNU, appear also to reflect, as you did imply earlier on, an internal conflict within ZANU. There's a claim among those around Emerson that the military is too strong, and you have this irony where Emerson was installed by the military. He remains in power because of the military, and yet you would prefer a situation where the military was not involved at all. That irony or that contradiction might play out. Huh?
Let's look at the candidates that have stepped up from ZANU-PF. Young, educated. Does that give ZANU-PF the edge over other political parties, and does it speak about renewal within ZANU-PF?
Well, first of all, I'm always surprised if anyone of your age group becomes a candidate for ZANU-PF. What are you looking for? If you want change, what are you looking for in ZANU-PF? One might say, well, what are you looking for in CCC, the same way? Because CCC has not defined an alternative at all, except getting into power. But I want to say the following. What's happening in our country is a very sad reflection of the extent to which politics has become a livelihood. The difference between being unemployed, no job, no future, no shoes, and being an MP with a car, a salary. But it explains why, for example, March Central, the primaries, there were 4,000 candidates for 20 positions.
Is that not a reflection of democracy?
No, come on. How can that be? It's a contest for a place to get into parliament, get into livelihood, to a pay packet. That's what it is, more than democracy. See, for me, if entering politics is based on a plan of action, an agency through which we can effect change in our country, I'll say fine. I'm not saying that not all MPs to be vacuous and don't have that objective in mind, but I'm just saying that so far the major driving force is getting into office for the benefits accruing from it. And when you are passing out $40,000 to each MP, just like that, why can't this be an attraction? And I see all kinds of people, artists and musicians, all joining the bandwagon. And you want to call it that democracy, yeah? Maybe. Maybe.
Let's look at the transition of Mtulingwe from being a technocrat to the politician who's contesting in Outbreak Park now on ZANU-PF primaries. What does that say to you?
It says the same thing. Politics of the stomach.
But he is already feeding, is he not?
Do you know anyone who's feeding who says, I've fed enough? Have you heard anybody say that? Yeah, he breaks a rule that technocrats, academics, Democrats, media people should not be involved in politics. And some of us have learned that lesson. You cannot be an educator, a thought leader, at the same time as you are involved in partisan politics. Certainly in Zimbabwe it doesn't work, in my view. Well, Truly has clearly sacrificed technocracy and for politics. And I think he has permanently, I can't see him going back to technocracy. Who would trust him as the technocrat? No one would trust him. So he has made his bed, he must lie on it. And I think there are even more things for him. When I saw him enter the Central Committee and the what do you call this? The Politburo, I'm sure there's a promise of bigger things. Vice presidency? Don't rule it out, huh?
Presidency?
I don't think it's going to. Anyway, after people like the incumbents, one can say, oh, no chance. Anyone can become president, even yourself. Even myself, except I don't want it. But I'm just saying that the criteria for that position, the bar is very low. It's not high. Why not?
As we conclude, Prof, maybe just for us, for the people who are watching, to have an understanding of the Zimbabwean political space, are there any likely shockers that can come to us in this year?
None. One of the things about Zimbabwe, the situation is that one, we have a regime, an incumbent regime, which is very well buttressed by security, army and so on. Two, you have 75% of all skilled and professional Zimbabweans outside the country. That has depleted not only civil society, but even the state sectors and public sectors. 75% of professional people, you and I, all of them, outside the country. Another 3 million people are flocking across borders, in South Africa. So that has released the pressure on the incumbency, or conversely reduce the capacity for the push for change. So it's a very depressing situation, And three, you have a very disorganized mass organizations, very disorganized, whether it's trade unions, whether it's the informal sector people, and whether it's the opposition movement. It's disorganized at the moment. Because when you think of change, you have to think of agency. You have to ask the question, what is the agency for that change? You see little or nothing at the moment. That's not to say it will not come one day, it will. But at the moment, you ask any shock, I don't expect any shock. No, I don't. Even coup will not be a shock for me, because it's something that can happen. Having happened 6 years ago, it can happen again. But would that be a shock to you?
I think so.
You ask for a shock?
I could be shocked.
No, I'll be shocked. I wouldn't be shocked. Having happened before, it won't be a shock to me. But I thought you meant by shock something positive. Not in the next few months, no. I wish there were such a positive shock. I would dance in the streets like you guys did for the coup.
You did not dance?
I sat there in the veranda and watched the madness going on. And I wrote about it at the time. It's gross stupidity in my view to have expected anything out of that.
I want to thank you, Professor Mandaza, for joining me on this, the Free Talk in Proud partnership with the Frederick Newman Foundation. Now Zimbabwe goes to elections in 2023. If by the Constitution, if we are going to use the boundaries that have been delimited and gazetted, then our elections are somewhat 5 months away from now. And we will be watching and following closely. Now, I was joined by political economist and renowned publisher, Professor Ibbo Mandaza, and we were talking about the politics, the future, and our country. This is Free Talk in proud partnership with the Frederick Newman Foundation and me, your host as usual, Dara Blessed Mhlanga. Thank you very much, Prof.